Well, hello again. This is me, Marcus Hall from Mark Nelson Denham, with another MN Style Guide, and this is the Lakeland Edition. Our first guest is Andrew my man.
Good to see you.
How you doing, man?
Very good.
So
good.
thank you for doing this, brother.
Course,
First and
course.
foremost, man. And we've got I've had the opportunity to go to your church, which was cool, and I wanted to do that before you did this style guide, so I can kind of see your style of pastoring. But first and foremost, we were introduced by a dear friend of both of ours,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
All right, and here and that I feel like we had a speed dating. It was,
Yeah.
It was kind of weird. Like I was like, it is.
Yeah.
But I got a chance to know you, man, and it's a cool dude, man. First and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, my man.
Yeah. So married. Actually, going to be celebrating 19 years of marriage this year.
Wow.
Met my college sweetheart. Married my college sweetheart, and we got married right after a month after I graduated college, and been married over the last 19 years. We have boy-girl twins. We have 5-year-old twins, and so they're keeping us busy right now for sure.
I bet you.
And I'm originally from kind of Tacoma, Washington, and found myself in Lakeland, Florida, as have you, and just loved it, and have really enjoyed it. Have lived here now for about 13 years. We've lived in Lakeland, and my wife is a college professor and a PhD, and so she's just very smart, very brilliant, and I'm not. I'm a 2.8 GPA, proud community college graduate, and very grateful to do life with her. And about 8 years ago, we started a church in Lakeland called Grace City Church, and that's what we've been doing for the last 8 years, and we've seen God do amazing things, and we reach a lot of young people at our church, and it's just it's a blast. So we have a good time.
Right on. So I recall you telling me that you were from Washington, Tacoma, and you met your wife there, right?
Yep.
And at the time, you're still an athlete, but you played ball, right?
Yeah, so I played college basketball 2 years at a JUCO, and then 2 years at a 4-year school just outside of Seattle. And so basketball has always been such a big part of my life. Basketball has been very, very good to me, and changed my life in a lot of ways, to be honest. A lot of relational, just people that are in my world. I still try to keep my hands as much as possible kind of in that sphere and in that world.
I know.
Yep.
So who's your favorite basketball player?
Right now, Luka Doncic. All-time Kobe. I was a
Okay,
Kobe
right
guy.
on. You were a Kobe guy.
Not a LeBron guy at all. LeBron's great, yada, yada, yada. But I was a Kobe. You couldn't be a Kobe guy
Right on.
and a LeBron
And
guy.
a LeBron
You couldn't
guy,
do it. And so, so I was a Kobe guy kind of traditionally, and then Luka Doncic is my favorite player.
So my best friend, his favorite athlete of all time is Kobe Bryant as well.
Of course.
I remember seeing him in Vegas at like an exhibition game, and Magic Johnson was there, and he was screaming Kobe's name, and just like it was crazy. But yeah, Kobe Bryant by far is his favorite athlete. So question, where were you when Kobe Bryant passed away?
Interesting question.
Right on.
So I was such a Kobe fan. I remember I was driving home from our third service of the day. I had somebody was actually driving, and I was in the passenger seat, and I was on my way home, and I got a text message from one of my friends and said, dude, Kobe died. And the text message I got was from one of my more conspiratorial friends. Right. And so I didn't believe it, because as soon as this friend texts me, he's the dude that believes in all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And so I look and I go on ESPN.com immediately, and I saw nothing. So I was like, no way. Like there's just no way. And I just keep refreshing my screen. In fact, I was such a Kobe guy. After, and what would happen is ESPN, boom, it hits on ESPN, and I'm just like, oh man. I got probably a dozen text messages from family and friends because they knew I was such a Kobe guy that they were texting me, hey man, are you good? I go home, I sit in the dark, because we had one more service. I literally sit in the dark for the next 3 hours, watch the coverage with like tears streaming down my face. I almost didn't even preach that night. I go back to church, I'm doing pre-service prayer, and I was just like, in a fog, so like for me, that was like a wild, like very, very weird day, and it was pretty amazing to see the visceral reaction of the nation.
Right on. Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody about this shortly after it happened. There's not a lot of people that you could mention that would have died, that would have elicited. That's how, to me, how special Kobe was. Is that there's not a lot of people that would have elicited that type of general reaction from the general public.
And especially since he died at such a young age. You know what I mean? Like
and with his daughter,
right?
I mean,
Oh,
the
it's
whole thing.
horrific.
And what was to me so impressive about Kobe is it felt like his life trajectory was even no matter how great
Right
it
on.
was.
You got
his life trajectory was. I mean, just won like an Academy Award. It's like
There you go.
this dude was going to have an incredible kind of after basketball career, and I think everybody kind of knew that. Whereas there's been other professional athletes that even the GOATs, even like MJ, and it's kind of like his post basketball career has been not that great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he hadn't been involved in anything.
No,
It's just been about him.
owner
And yeah, you
with,
got
with a team that hasn't
you don't
won.
hear him. Yeah,
It just felt like everything that Kobe was touching towards the end of his career was just turning to gold. And so it was. I distinctly remember that day.
The only other athlete that I can think of that passed away that might have had such a huger impact was the Juice.
Yeah.
The Juice for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a pretty big impact.
I'm just kidding. Man. So anyway, my favorite athlete, man, would be by far Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get to experience a lot of him as a child or through his full life, but his story, his history, how he impacted just sports in general and in life, and what he did was just So I would say Muhammad Ali.
And standing up for a lot of things that at the time were obviously
Yeah,
questionable.
you got it. There you go.
And in hindsight, some of those things like, he was right.
You got right now moving for in the future how it's actually impacted today's. Wow, you got it. He did the right things. You know what I mean? Now that you get a little more story about it. All right.
100%.
So let's go back to your church and how you're impacted and how you've grown and what you plan to do in Lakeland or your future. What are your thoughts on that, man? So let's start from the beginning. You and your wife, I heard the story. Yeah, you were going to church here, and then you decided you were going to open.
Yeah, we decided to start one, and so what we did is we invited about 40 to 50 people that we knew, people like Tim and Becky Cox, who and a number of other people, and we'd be having conversations of going, and I was having a bunch of coffees and going, hey, here's what we have in our heart, here's what we want to try to do, and what you're trying to do, and you've been in business for a long time, you're trying to paint a picture of what can be. And that's kind of what we were trying to do. Especially, you're trying to paint a picture for what can be with something that people are already in their minds.
They have their own.
Familiar
Yeah,
with.
you got it. Yep.
And so I think you're trying to paint a picture to go, it's going to be kind of like that and nothing like that all at the same time,
Yep.
And so I think that's what we tried to do. And then so we invited these 40 to 50 people to be kind of on what we called our launch team. And so we started meeting on kind of Sunday afternoons, Sunday evenings in our home. And it was like 40, 50 people on little foldy chairs in our house with the guy that does our music playing an acoustic guitar and singing some songs, and we would pray. And we had like this freestanding whiteboard. It was like the first thing that we ever purchased as Grace City Church was this freestanding whiteboard. I was so pumped to drive to the store and buy this whiteboard, and we were like, we're gonna change the world with this whiteboard, and so that's what we would do. And so I just taught in our living room, when we say church, here's what we mean.
Right on.
And here's the cultural pieces that we mean. And so we're writing stuff on the whiteboard, and so we did that for a number of months. And then what we started doing is we started doing once a month what we called intra services. So that was hey, when we say church, here's what we mean. And so we just started inviting the general public at that point. And we would have anywhere from about 200 to 400 people coming to these once a month gatherings. And then that's when we knew, okay, we have a church. Okay, this is going to work to some degree. And so we did 5 of those through the summer of 2015. And then September of 2016, we opened up the doors and we launched the church. And
now you're doing
the rest is history. And so now we're doing 4 services.
4
in
services a
Lakeland.
day.
We're doing 2 services in Tampa. So we opened up a location in Tampa about 2 years ago.
Wow.
And so so that's kind of what's going on now. And we just purchased 50 acres here in Lakeland. And
cool.
And so we're raising money to build kind of our venue and our building kind of there to help as many people as we can.
When you expect it to be moving, do you have a date yet?
As soon as we raise the money, as soon as we can start this sucker. But the goal would be like Easter of 2026 is like the thing we're running.
So a
hard
couple
after
years
right
now.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things growing up, and my mom was a pastor, and she had a holiness church, so there was snakes and the whole deal jumping around. But one of the things that I've always been curious about is, and if you're not comfortable talking about that, it's cool. We can move along. But the ask. Like at churches and tithes and understanding, because there's that's part of a church.
Yes.
And then what you actually do, and I don't mean to be controversial. I'm just
this is great.
teaching.
I love this conversation.
Right on.
So I didn't preach on giving or tithing
right on.
for the first 7 years of our church, and our church is exploding, reaching a bunch of people, and I didn't talk about it. And I had this kind of epiphany. I had this thought, because there is a principle that the Bible does talk about. It talks about, it doesn't just talk about general generosity, although it does talk about that.
Yep.
It also talks about the tithe, which is giving. If you didn't grow up in church, you know, the people that I had no understanding of this. I got saved when I was 17, gave my heart to Christ, started going to church. So all this stuff was completely I didn't know I shouldn't be having sex with my girlfriend after what's wrong with that? And so I care about her, and so so there are a lot of things I didn't know. But the Bible talks about this understanding of giving 10% of your income to the local storehouse, the church, right? And what was interesting is I had been living. So then I learned this principle after I got saved, and I had been living with this principle for the last 20 years. And 7 years into our church, I thought to myself, you know what's interesting? This financial stewardship, like how I manage, how I govern my resources, giving God 10%, being a generous person in general, it's working for me. Like God is, because there is this theme in the Bible that if you're trustworthy with a little, you'll be trustworthy with much, right? And so there is a stewardship component to life in general, and whether you're following Jesus or not, that you understand there is a stewardship component to life. And so what I found in my life is if I steward resources the way that God has ordained it and God has set it up, He's taking care of me. And we always very shudder. It doesn't mean that people that tithe don't sometimes lose their job or that everything's always rosy. I think I'm always very cautious with that. However, there is something about the principle, and I thought this to myself. I have not shared this with our church. And what's interesting is there are a lot of things I do that me and Christina do in our marriage that are principles for a healthy, thriving marriage that I have no problem sharing with our church. Right. Things like date nights and things like being married no matter how long you've been married, keep having sex. Like there are all kinds of things that I'm going, I share marriage principles all the time without hesitation. And my frame of reference is going, it's biblical, it's working for my wife and I. We have an incredibly thriving marriage. Why wouldn't I share this to the thousands of people that come to me for those things, that come to our church for those things? And I thought, why wouldn't I share financial principles that are so then I'm the beneficiary of principles that I'm living in my own personal life that I'm not sharing with our church. And I felt like there was a dereliction of duty as a pastor. And so about a year and a half ago, I was like, I need to start sharing principles in the area of finance, because to your point, I was so worried about.
I get that, right?
I didn't want people, because I didn't grow up in.
You don't want to throw people off and go into church and they pass the basket around
we're not the money church. But there are principles that are true, and so now kind of our approach is, hey, the Lord. In fact, it's the only area in the scriptures that the Lord says, "Test me in this." Like I tell people all the time, I wouldn't recommend building and orienting your life around just constantly testing God. But when He does in the scriptures tell Him to do it, I would do it. And so in Malachi, the Lord says, hey, test me in this and see if I will not throw open the windows of heaven. Like if you trust me with the tithe, the first 10%, I'll do more with your 90% than you could ever do with 100%. And that's the principle of, God, I'm going to trust you with these resources. So I'm getting way more comfortable talking about it because of this paradigm shift that I had, that I said, I have no problem sharing marriage principles. I have no problem sharing healthy relational principles in friendship, because I have robust, great friendships, and there's principles that I have in my life that help me walk in those things. I need to share that in the area of finances. And there's very little that Jesus talked about more than finances. Because what do husband and wives fight about? Finances.
Money.
What do people think about when they're starting a business? Finances. What keeps people up at night? Finances.
General worry. Money.
So why wouldn't we talk about those things?
Right on.
So,
planning. Right on.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, man. So let's get on to it. Let's talk about style. Yeah. So I'm old school, and so for me going to church, and I've been in your church, and it's just kind of like you do come as you are kind of thing or whatever. And except for maybe Easter, I didn't go on Easter, but where you get suited.
Yeah, every once in a while there's a suit jacket that comes on.
So
Easter.
I've noticed the transition with pastors, even like you got your swag. It's more kind of chill.
I would wear this on a Sunday.
Right on. That's it. I noticed that. Right. You're cool with that. So was there ever? Do you get heat from people, or is that
not
thing?
as much anymore? We don't get heat about as much things as I think we would, because people kind of know we have a very strong identity at Grace City. So it's like, hey, we're not everybody's cup of tea, and if this now here's what I would say too. When it comes to style, sometimes I find it fascinating, because sometimes one person's style is another person's dressing down.
Amen.
And so sometimes it can get kind of interesting, because you might have one person that has incredible style and they're very well put together, and their outfit was much more carefully curated than the person that just threw on an oversized suit.
Okay. Yeah, the fit is everything.
And
that's
so
real.
it's like, wait a minute.
Fit is everything.
I would argue this person is better dressed for church
than this guy
you are.
Right on.
Just because
you
you have
a
suit pants on and you got a suit jacket on doesn't mean
that doesn't fit.
That you put any more time into that ever. And there's a fine line, right? Because we want a come as you are, right? We want that we want people's expression to be, represented, and I think that's a good thing. And I also think there is something to be said of going, and I also want to look well put together and well presented. If I'm going to get up there and preach God's word, or we want to be well put together. But like I said, that style can play out in a number of different ways, and churches ebb and flow. And like I have a mentor in my life who's incredible. I remember one time he goes, man, I just, he's more of an old school guy, and he goes, man, I just wish you and some of your friends would put on a suit jacket.
Now, that's my next question. Do you ever wear a suit jacket?
Easter.
You stuttered. You stuttered. Now, hey,
no,
Easter, are you lying right now? Because
no, I'm not lying. Ask him. Easter, Christmas Eve.
You will put on a
those
suit
tend
jacket.
to be your more like traditional kind of services, where we will definitely kind of like dress it up a little more than we otherwise would. But also, I was wearing a suit jacket my first 4 or 5 years of ministry, because that was back when like the suit jacket and t-shirt was like a big thing. And so a part of it is, I had a friend say this one time, and I love this. He goes, my goal is, I'm never out of style, I'm never in style.
I heard that.
And I just thought, what a great place to live. I'm never out of style, I'm never in style. And I think sometimes, that ebbs and flows, and there's going to probably come a day where wearing a suit jacket to church kind of is, the current kind of type thing. So I think that stuff ebbs and flows.
Right. So Lakeland. So where are we at now? And when you first got here, and where Lakeland is today, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. It's changed a lot. I've lived here 13 years. I think anytime you have growth, and you have a bunch of people moving from all over the country, like myself, I came from the Seattle area. And so the thing that I've always tried to not do, and we've pastored and lived in the Washington, D.C. area, in the Seattle area, and the Florida area. So those are three very different ecosystems.
Yeah,
those are very, you have your Mid-Atlantic, DMV area, you got the Pacific Northwest, granola-like vibe, and then you have kind of your Southeast Florida. Here's what I've always tried to do. I just want to be me all the way.
Okay.
And I just have always tried to do that. And so whenever I come into places, I don't overthink the culture that's already there. I go, what is a great culture that would transcend,
period,
no matter where I live. So there are things like, it's gonna sound real funny, but things like spirit of joy. That stuff plays everywhere. Being a positive person, that's gonna play everywhere. And so Lakeland's so interesting because I think it's changed so much, and I think you probably have the old school garb for sure, like in our city, that don't love that. Like I'm at the golf club and I hear like like people moving here, and it's kind of funny, but I think change is inevitable. And so I think the same thing that sometimes people get frustrated about in our city of the growth is the same thing that I get pumped on. It's the same thing that I get excited about. And I think that it's changed a lot in that I think Lakeland is just more people are moving here. It's creating more industry. It's creating style. Again, style has changed. But I've had people walk into our church and go, "This does not feel like it's in
Yeah,
Lakeland."
I don't.
And it's like, no. Like, these people are here. Like, obviously, right? We're reaching them, and I think more people are feeling comfortable. But you come to our church, man, you're gonna have. You're gonna have the extremes.
It's a melting pot.
It's a melting pot,
very
man.
diverse.
You're
right
gonna
on.
have
It
the
is.
extremes.
You
You're
got-
gonna have people that think very much about style, or people that are very, very current, and then you're gonna have the farmer that doesn't care anything about that. And I love that. And I think the more environments we have like that, the better. And that's what I love about Lakeland, is you kind of have everything.
It is. It's a little country, but you've got Tampa and Orlando and right here, and so
100%.
people are. It's kind of the outskirts of that, and so
And
it's
the more
really
college
cool.
students that are staying in the area help too.
That's real.
That's
you
something
have a
to
university that's right
Yeah.
here. Well, man, I'm gonna wrap this up, man. I appreciate your time again. It's love talking to you. It's always a blessing, and no
Thanks.
pun intended.
Yeah.
It is good advice and all the way around, man. So, any last words?
We just love having you in Lakeland.
All right,
We love
right
having
on,
you
man.
here.
That's right. I
And-
appreciate
and,
the
and I love anybody that's using their creative gifts and going for it. And
Thank
so
you.
I'm a fan, man.
Right on, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
So good to
Sure.
see you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of MN Style Guide, and we will catch you later for another one. Have a great day.